Manuel, if you can just introduce yourself a little bit, tell people who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into the questions.
I'm Maluil Aleer Deng. I think I think I'm just a creative. I like the process of starting an idea and bringing it to life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So we've got a creative guy here today. Manuel, as I just talked to you before, we've got our topic of talking about black manhood, masculinity, etc. Now, to start is I just want you to maybe what's your opinion on what we've just discussed, and the current status, or what is a black man? What is manhood to you? And then the current status of black men in general.
I'll start with the status. I think the current status of a black man is very, especially in our Sudanese community, is very fragmented or just made up. I think we young Sudanese men, we view, or we get our idea of manhood from a TV screen. I like to say we're a fatherless generation. So I feel like coming up there was no guidance, and we didn't really have any manhood until look on TV, there's a 50 Cent or there's a whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think it's very I think it's very fake or not or fragmented from that.
Right.
And then the second part of that question was, what's my definition?
Yeah.
of
What's
man?
your opinion? What is a man to you? What makes a man? What does that mean to you?
To me, the first thing is accountability. I think the stages of adolescence, I think that's when a young boy or transitioning to a man, they first encounter that they have to be accountable for their actions. So firstly, accountability. And then I think leadership is the second thing that equates for a man. And then honesty or truth. I think those are the three main principles.
That make up a man. Okay. I just want to touch a little bit more about. You mentioned influences. So you mentioned that we, particularly us here that have come out and grow up in the Western world, that we get our idea or our concept of what a man is from the TV and from the screen.
Entertainment.
Can you just expand a little bit about that? In that, is it a positive thing? Is it a negative thing?
I think
etc.
it's an unfortunate situation. You know what I mean? I really believe in the saying, stand for something or fall for anything.
Okay.
And I feel like a lot of us, when we came to, I'll just speak personally because I don't want to talk on anyone.
Yeah.
But coming to Australia, I think we're not really informed on anything. We come here very confused.
Yeah.
No one really tells us why we're in a new environment. Why suddenly everyone around you is white? Like there's no real explanation to the context that you live in.
Right.
So I think that brings about a lot of confusion. And then there's an identity problem because no one really tells you about back home or what's going on. All you just hear the name John Garang and that's it. You don't really get told anything about the culture you come from or anything. So I think all these things that are usually normal in a child's life to form their identity is missing in our community. And then if that's not nurtured or fixed quickly, I think that's when it turns into, because every kid's gonna try find themselves in something.
Yeah.
And usually the first thing they see is a music video or a movie and these places black men are not really, or black people are never really displayed as like a boss or anything. It's usually a pimp, a gangster, or
That's right.
You feel me?
Yeah.
So I feel like we adapt to these roles.
Yeah. I think that's it's good that you said that, because I think one of the things at the moment that's very confusing in our community is some of our young people are doing things that culturally we've never even heard of before. Some of the things are a bit of a shock. Robbing someone's car and taking it and beating up some old lady and robbing a petrol station, things like that. To our parents and to someone, this is shocking. This is something that you wouldn't think your child would commit, etc. But
real quick, I think there's a second part to that. I think there's like there's a toxic environment when a lot of young confused men come together. They feed each other these ideas that they wouldn't normally do as an individual, or because their peers are.
They're in a group.
Yeah.
And so I think what I was saying is these people or these artists or these people that we see on TV, etc., they likely had a similar dysfunctional growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So they, them becoming our example of what manhood is, it leaves us disadvantaged.
Yes.
Yeah, it leaves us disadvantaged. And so on the back of that, I don't know if you've seen, Maluil, there's been a recent controversy in our community on social media, right, with young girls and young women coming out. Have you seen that? Coming out, allegations of sexual assault, etc., etc. And there's a general beef, or if you call it, or uneasiness between men and women in our community. What do you think? What do you think that could come from, or what's your thought on that?
I've actually been talking to a lot of my young Sudanese women friends about the same issue, and I don't know. I hate talking outside the context of myself, but I feel like in most Sudanese homes, I was being not included. There's a very big bias to the way that young girls and young boys are treated from the get-go. You know what I mean? I feel like young men have this more not freedom, but they get to do more. Or there's an obvious bias in the house where the young girl's supposed to clean and do the dishes and keep the house tidy and be quiet and not speak when, you know what I mean? There's all these rules set up for a woman that are not really made for a man. So I think from the get-go there's a division. And I think that's where it starts. And then as I guess as we grow older, this little division turns into like a huge spectrum where one's all the way to the right and one's all the way to the left. And of course there's other aspects, right? But I think that's where it starts. Is that enough, or do you want me to explain?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Because, in most cultures or most households or most, the way that a boy grows up and the way that a girl grows up are different. Just because that's nature. Naturally they're different.
Yes.
And obviously in our culture, there's a bit conservative. There's I guess specific roles assigned to depending if you're a male or female. Mm-hmm. So I can understand where that comes from. What I do want you to touch on a little bit is there's this attitude that I see is a disappointment from a lot of the young girls, females, etc. In that like a hurt in that the men that they're dealing with or whatever, or they come across is niggas ain't the saying, and it comes from a hurt, it comes from a disappointment, and then as recently as you've seen with all the allegations and all this stuff, what would you say to men? Do you think that disappointment is justified in one question? And then what role have we played as men in that, in your opinion?
I think it's very justified. I think it's very factual. Look, it's very weird for me because I think I strayed away from that lifestyle, You know what I mean? From all that party, all that I kind of push myself away from. So I don't really, I'm not in that perspective. But I do believe, having friends that live that life and etc. I do believe that it's very justified. I feel like first of all, I feel like black women are the most disrespected women, period. And then I feel like that's where the anger or disappointment comes from, because these women are not accepted or disrespected by the rest of the world, and then they're also disrespected by the men they think are supposed to protect them and guide them. Yeah. They often find themselves having to help. They find themselves helping these men try grow or whatever it is. They're there for these men, but oftentimes these men are not there for them.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I feel like that was one part of the. What was the second part of the question?
I can't even remember what the second part is, but no, I get what you're saying. And I am one time I went to a dinner, and I think it's after I graduated. I went to a dinner, and I was only the guy there. It was like there was a lot of people that graduated, Sudanese that graduated at the same time, and I was only a guy at that dinner, and the whole conversation. It was very uncomfortable for me because these are older. I was younger than these are older, but the whole conversation was about the disappointment in men, right, that they've come across, and and this, and they're asking my opinion. Now, what I they're asking for my opinion and things like that, and etc. So there's a real hurt there, and I think that's something that black men are a little bit ignorant to.
I disagree.
And not even that, careless too. Ignorant but careless too, because there's a, like you said, there's an ugly mentality that developed, which allows us to mistreat.
It's not just developed; it's pushed. I remember being young, people be like, why are you trying to play the piano? Why are you trying to read a book? That's some white things to do. So we've put ourselves in this little box of this. A black man can only be this, and if you're not that, you're neglected or rejected upon the bigger group.
Yeah. And so that causes a lot of problems when you look at that as a community altogether, because if you don't have a family, if you don't have male, female, producing families being the institution, and then you're gonna have a cycle where people don't come up right. If you're gonna have a cycle where you have single parents, you have these men just running crazy, etc. From a society perspective and from a community perspective, that's destruction. That's literally destruction. You can't build like that. Now, I just want to move on and talk specifically about you as you being an artist or an aspiring artist. And I'm going to just read to you a quote, okay? It's from a scholar, an African-American scholar. And he says, "We can't deny the fact that hip-hoppers, rappers, are the gods of the black community." Okay? A god is a being of power and force. There is no other element in the black community that has the power to shape and direct black culture and thought, and through black life, like the rappers. Okay? This is a very true statement. The artists, whether it's rappers or whether it's artists or the cultural cadet, they have the biggest influence in terms of shaping people's thoughts and attitudes and things like that. What do you say as an aspiring artist? What do you think is the role with that context? What do you think is the role of people that are artists and that are rappers and musicians and things like that? Do they have a role? Do they have a responsibility?
I think they're supposed to, but I think that's missing. Because to me, artistry, the number one thing or the most important thing that should represent art is truth. It should be a truthfulness to your work. Whether it's negative or positive, I think it should just it should be based on truth. Because I feel like people relate to that. People relate to vulnerability, regardless of what that is. It's inspiring, and I think that's why art is so powerful, because it's very inspiring. It's one of the few things that can make people feel like they want to do something or give them a theme to live their life to. Because people live on music. They don't just. It's not just like a one-time
Say
thing.
that again.
People live on it. So I think it's very important for us to try to be truthful. But sadly, I don't see that. I see a lot of young Sudanese or African artists trying to play this image, trying to be this, trying to be what they see from other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Instead of just reflecting on what life is like for them here.
Yeah.
Regardless of the pros or cons that come with it. But I do believe that artists always have the biggest impact in terms of shaping culture.
Right. You know, so big corporations and companies and big money makers and things like that have recognized this power that hip hop has, or it's the voice of young people, of the youth of Kidem. All over the world. It's not just, we're not talking about America, all over the world. You know, if you want to talk about Sudanese and culture, those songs, the traditional songs and things like that, the values that are hidden to that's people. It's the same thing, has the same effect, depending, regardless to where you look in the world. Now, when we want to have a look at specifically hip hop, because this is what we tune into a lot as black men or etc. Hip hop, when it first started, from what I read, is again the voice of the ghetto, the voice of, you know, downtrodden black people in America, wherever, and it used to be positive, it used to be uplifting, it used to be hidden, right? And then big money came into it, right? And it turned into gangster rap. It turned into gangster rap in the 90s, things like that. Now it's drug. You just push drugs. The drug culture is pushed. And what I'm suggesting and saying is that I don't think that just happened in a vacuum. I think it's a concerted effort, because of its power. It's a concerted effort to water down the message in it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a two-sided blade. You know what I mean? I do think there's some agendas for sure. I make certain artists make certain music to display a certain image, but I don't think it came from an unorganic place necessarily. I think shock value is a big thing in rap music. You know what I mean? I think that's where it came from. I think early on when these songs started coming out, calling women hoes or whatever, when that type of music, that type of gangster appeal music came out, like when it first came out, it was shocking. It was controversial, so people gravitated towards it, and it started making a lot of money. And then I think for a while it stopped. But like you were saying, big corporations saw not only how much money it was making, but how much it affected people.
The influence.
You know what I mean? Yeah, the influence of it. So yeah, I think it's a double-sided blade.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Again, I want to have a look. So there's hip hop. We see the same thing in another genre, another black-dominated genre, in reggae. Mm-hmm. Reggae music.
What do you mean by that?
Reggae music. I just give me a sec. So in reggae music, the same type of trend, in my opinion, we are seeing and we've seen. In that reggae music started as Rastafarian, very innocent, empowering type messages. The Bob Marleys, the soulful stuff.
With a message, yeah.
With the message. And then it evolved into dancehall, right? It evolved, and now it's some of the filthiest music you'll ever you'll ever find. I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm not saying I don't like the dance. I don't know the vibe cartels and the and you know and the things like that. But what's sad is the good message is taken out, and it's filth that's being, you talk about things that in the music that you wouldn't comfortably, that shouldn't be aired, in my opinion. Obviously, it's just my opinion. Aired in airways, and then, but the problem with that is the impact of it is it normalizes that in the society. So those that listen to the music, it normalizes you disrespecting the woman. It normalizes, and then too, the women that listen to it, it allows them to accept disrespect. They now call themselves bees and hoes, etc. Do you know what I mean? So the same trend, from what I've observed, we've seen in reggae music. Now, Afrobeats has come up real quick recently of days, but I'm seeing the same. Afrobeat started with "You Are My African Queen," kide kide. You know what I mean? Real soulful, real nice. You couldn't find, like, the African culture. You can't really talk about certain things publicly. You know what I mean? Or airways and things like that. But now you begin to start to see the shift. It's shifting into, videos of, things like that and things like that. And you can call me a conspiracy theorist or whatever, but I think it's a trap that artists get trapped in, where they feel like they need to do that and to go into that trend, and I think it's really, really destructive. It's really, really destructive.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely an agenda, and I think where the problem comes about is the actual music industry, which is dying now. So I feel like in a few years it might shift. But if you look at how an artist comes up in the traditional old ways, is they will start off making music for themselves, and once they get a buzz in their city or surrounding areas, that's when they attract a label or a bigger company to represent them.
The money in it, yeah.
But when they go under these labels, there's pressure. There's pressure from these labels for them to have a hit or the next charting song or whatever, and I think these things water down an artist. I don't think artists should be limited or structured in that much, and usually these record labels are very controlling in especially a young artist's creativity. They take that away from them. They oftentimes say, no, you need to talk about A, B, and C.
Right.
And then if it doesn't work, we'll take everything from you.
Yeah.
So I think there's still this very the industry doesn't represent the culture.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The industry is very manufactured and fake. So it's sad to see that a lot of artists get trapped in that void.
Yeah. It's the money in it. At the end of the day, it's some powerful rich people have seen the power of its influence and the money that it makes, and they've got a hold of it, essentially, in my opinion. And it's our artists, they might have the best intentions of heart when they go out and do these things and rap when they come up and things like that, but at the end of the day, they're going to make money. And so it becomes a trap, a trap for them. Now, what I want to talk about is the influence. So particularly now here in Australia, is we've got a gang culture that's coming up in the young ones now. There was a stabbing. I don't know if you read. There was a stabbing recently in Melbourne. That's probably like the 6th one in 2 years, where it's other Sudanese.
I think more than that.
Yeah.
Higher than that.
Exactly. So where it's other Sudanese adopting, in my opinion, from hip hop culture, from what we're seeing on TV and things like that, adopting this gang mentality, right? And it's havoc. It's reaching havoc in our community. Now, what I want to talk about is the influence. So particularly now here in Australia, is we've got a gang culture that's coming up in the young ones now. There was a stabbing. I don't know if you read. There was a stabbing recently in Melbourne. That's probably like the 6th one in 2 years, where it's other Sudanese.
I think more than that.
Huh?
I think
Yeah.
higher than that.
Exactly. So where it's other Sudanese adopting, in my opinion, from hip hop culture, from what we're seeing on TV and things like that, adopting this gang mentality, right? And it's havoc. It's reaching havoc in our community.
Mm-hmm.
When I work when in my line of work, sometimes I've had work clients that work at youth justice centers, right? And they see my name. Oh man, that's a very regular name around here. You know what I mean? Because in the system, the name people with a Deng associated with is in and out of that system all the time. Do you know what I mean? So it's really bad. I think I read too sometime. They're saying that in Adelaide at one point there was like 85% of the people in the criminal youth justice were of African or Sudanese. You know. Other artists out there, there's a lot of artists like you, aspiring artists. What would you say? What can an artist do to I guess to challenge that a little bit?
To challenge what's happening.
Yeah.
I think it all comes back down to truth, being truthful. You know what I mean? Talking about the reasons why. Because to me it's a very complex issue. What's going on? There's so many aspects to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's things like social racism that a lot of young black people face. You know.
Yeah.
I find myself often if I'm walking in the street and I'm behind a older or white lady, I think to myself, how can I make myself seem less harmful? And these thoughts shouldn't come up in your brain in any society. So I think one thing is social racism or microaggressions or these problems. And there's also that group mentality I was talking about, that toxic group mentality. There's also fear. There's a lot of fear in our community. I just think it's a very complex issue. So I think if artists, because what artists do in my opinion, they find a topic and they simplify it or make it consumable in a fun or rhythmic way. But there's usually always consciously or subconsciously, there's always a theme to a song or a theme to a music. So I think if artists just chose to be more truthful with their platform and talk about their experiences, whether positive or negative, but in a positive light, in an honest light, I feel like a lot of young people especially, I'm kind of going through that too. So let me think. I think music changes perspective. So they're like, even though I might not fully agree with what this artist is saying, there's a perspective or there's a thing I relate to, so let me learn from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think there's a very psychological power to music where your art is changing who you are without you even knowing. You know what I mean? Because it's something you hear repeatedly. It's almost brainwashing in a way. So I feel like if people were more truthful, it would help.
Right, yeah. No, that's good. Like from an artist perspective, I think everyone's got an influence, whether we conscious of it or we're not. Everyone's got an influence, and obviously, if you're an artist and you've got a following and you've got a fan base, or you're considered highly in a group or kide, your influence has more weight. Right? So a pastor at the church can talk all day, good, right, etc., etc. But they're not gonna have the same influence as if Kanye West does a tweet. Do you understand? You know, like, or if whoever like that's held highly in a society, particularly by young people. Do you know?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that point up because I do believe that's why I say it needs to be truthful, whether positive or negative, because like you're saying, no young person is gonna relate to a pastor because it's out of their world, out of their context of what they live in. So
yeah. And so like again, like you said, the issue with gangs and things like that, or some of the things that's happening in our community, it's complex. There is who they're looking up to, that influence. There is parenting and our actual community and what do we have in place to teach our kids and things like that. There's a lot. It's complex, like you said. There's a lot involved.
Yeah.
My last little bit to ask you, Maluil, is going back to the beginning when we talk about manhood and black manhood and things like that. What I want to talk about potential solutions. What do you think can be done to return some of these values that we've lost as men? Some of the responsibility, accountability, some of those things we talked about before. What can be done? What can we do? How do we get back to being men or whatever? Like what can we do to get back on track? From your perspective and opinion.
Whether it's through therapy, whether it's through group community programming or whatever systems that can be put about. I think back to the word truth. I think the truth hurts, but I think it's important to sit young men down, especially adolescent men, and just make them question the way they're living. You know what I mean? Make them think about it. I think that's the core problem. There needs to be a foundation where young people can come and just be heard in a sense, be told the truth, because it's a lot. Be confronted. That's what I'm trying to say. I think there's a lack of confrontation that's needed in young men, especially men. I feel like there's a lot of misguided pride, so it's hard to teach a young man, because men have the ability to completely shut out emotion. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that can be very dangerous if it's not taught. So I think young men need to be confronted. Like, why are you out in the streets? What's the purpose? What's the goal? Where's it going to lead you? These questions that will never come to their head because there's a lot of anger and confusion. So they wouldn't think about the future or their being accountable for their decisions or what they just that frame of reference is just gone, because I feel like a lot of young men are just kind of zombies. They kind of just they're lost, and then they're always drinking or doing drugs, so they never really have a sobering moment. So I think there needs to be a therapeutic way to talk and let not even like tell young people what to do, but just make them question the things they're doing.
Right. Yeah. No, I think you're right. Ignorance is what I see out there. There's a lot of ignorance, and ignorance plus pride is pretty terrible sometimes. When you're ignorant but you're proud about how ignorant you are, and so we are proud about how ignorant we are.
One more thing to that, I think there needs to be a bridging in the generations. I think that's also very important. I think these young people who I think childhood neglect is very big in our community, right? And I think there needs to be a point where young people can speak to their parents or the people that raised them and be like, and just talk. You hurt me in this way. Because I think there's a very powerful energy or transition or transformation that comes with honest expression between the two generations. So I feel like that's a big problem. There's this huge gap between the generations where kids have all this bottled up emotion, anger, neglect, etc. that they don't want to tell their parents, that they never tell their parents. And because they never tell their parents or the people that raised them, it holds deep in them. And I feel like that's where addiction comes from. I feel like addiction from drugs, alcohol, and stuff it's never an outside thing. I think it's filling this void that a lot of people have because there's a lot of anger, whatever inside them. So I feel like there needs to be a connection or a healing.
No, like
generations.
I hear that a lot, Maluil. And the thing is we need to think about what's the vehicle in which we can skillfully make something like that happen
Right.
as a community?
Right.
What's the vehicle in which we can, you know, where we see there's ignorance, what's the vehicle in which we can address that ignorance and provide information?
Because once again, it's very complex. Because from the older generation side, they come from a world of
That's right.
trauma, war, etc.
That's right.
They wouldn't want to open up about it, and that.
That's right. So what's the vehicle and a skillful vehicle, because you have to. It's delicate. You know, you're talking about delicate things, etc. But at the same time, too, as men, I'm of the opinion that too many people just feel sorry for themselves.
You know,
there's a need for personal accountability.
Yes.
There's a need, like, if you're gonna just drink all day and drink your problems away, regardless to what the community does, regardless to what vehicles, regardless to the support, regardless, there's a need for personal accountability, and you know, and that's one of the lost qualities that I think as black men or as men is, you know, you just stop complaining all the time, man. Like, you know, yes, we weren't born into perfect family environments. Yes, we weren't, you know, we didn't maybe have the perfect, we didn't get Jordans or whatever when we were young, you know, or this, but like, we have the power, you know, particularly us here that come out to here in the Western world. Like, we have a lot more opportunity than we realize, and we just need to stop complaining and take personal accountability. All right, this has happened, right? This is about, but okay, what do I do about it? Do you know what I mean? Like a logical way of, you know, and I think.
I agree with you, but I don't think a lot of people have the willpower to, like, just a lot of people just don't have that innate ability to live like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think a lot of people.
Yeah, and for me, like, I'm probably, some people can maybe consider me a toxic. You know how they talk about toxic masculinity and things like that. Some people might consider my views as toxic, or, you know what I mean? But I really do feel like sometimes, man, people need to just man up and just,
For sure.
you know, and just do, you know, stop complaining
100%.
and just, you know, take responsibility and you know,
100%.
and you know, touch your, you know, emotional. Oh, this happened to me. This happened to me. This is purely my, you know. Yes, you can acknowledge that. Yes, okay, right. But hey, it's happened. Let's move on. Let's look at this future. You know.
In my opinion, you have to acknowledge it before you can move on. You have to.
Yeah.
It has to be sorted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like the reason a lot of people play victim is because they have things that just happened when they were young that they're still holding on to. That until they find a reason to let go of it, they're never gonna develop. They'll never grow until they face the demon within them, I guess. You know what I'm saying? So I think what you're saying is very, very true. Very, like, 100%. People just need to take accountability, man up, and move on. But in my opinion, I don't think that's even possible without people looking back and reflecting on why. Because a lot of people don't know why they're the way they are. A lot of people drink every day, but they themselves don't understand why they're drinking every day, or why they feel sad inside, or why there's this void that they have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And until they look in the mirror and face that, I don't think personal development is even in the field of questioning.
Right.
Because like I'm saying, a lot of people, most people don't have that willpower to just or they don't have the right guidance or people to look up to, or, you know, to just take a step back and stop and back. Okay, I have the power to restructure my life. I have the power to actually organize myself and take myself out of situations that I'm in. It's just that ability is gone. There's lack of leadership.
Yeah. No, and it's like it's sad. It's sad to see sometimes when you have a broken spirit, somebody that just has given up on themselves, given up on Kedang. And that's really sad to see, and particularly when you're so young, when you're 18, when we're 18, when you're 19, when you're 17, you have the whole world ahead of you, and to just get into that state. So
you brought up a good point before. Sorry to cut you off, but we are in the Western world. You know what I mean? We're 100 times luckier most people in the world.
Yeah.
And the fact that we don't see that aspect and pounce on it or take opportunity because we can.
Yeah, and that's the pain of our parents, because our parents see us wasting opportunity. You know, you see the parent that's always, you know, our parent. A lot of it, oh, they're always talking, they're always more, right? They just don't understand. This is not, it's not the village, but they see the value of the opportunity that we have, and it hurts as a parent to see your child throw it away or, you know, not take use of it.
Of course.
And so, you know, we're always talking about, you know, parents or community that don't understand, or kida. As young people, and then again we take the victim, or you know, we take the victim in that, you know, maybe our parents weren't quite there like they should be, kida. But I feel like there's a real lack of understanding on our part, because you have to understand the situation that you come from. You have to understand you know, you're not a kawaii kid. You're not one that's growing up. You know, like, you know what I mean. You have to understand your unique context in life, and then go from there. When we take out there, we begin to take other people's context and try and apply it into our lives.
Stand for something appropriate.
It doesn't work. You know, you can't. The same expectations that your white friend might have on their parents. You know, like, we have to modify getting to our own unique context, you know, and experience. So, but yeah, I think
that's another complex issue.
Yeah, it is complex issue.
Because I was about to say one more point. I think what's missing is in most other societies, parents tell their kids stories of how they grew up and where they came from. And I think that's really powerful to have those stories, because like once again it gives you a sense of who you are, and it's motivating if you learn about the impoverishment and like the pain that your parents went through. I feel like it would motivate young people to apply themselves more.
Right. Yeah, and that's good, and that's what I was talking about before, is that in terms of solutions, everything we've discussed, we need to figure out vehicles. We need to figure out ways in which, because you're not the only person that has similar ideas about what